Welcome to Home's Room. Just like Homeroom, we start off our day getting together with our homies, swapping stories, even a little kiss and tell action. This podcast contains language not suitable for younger listeners, topics about sex and mental health. Discretion is advised. Our views are our own. Let class begin. Here we go. Welcome back to another episode of Home's Room. I'm here with Caitlin again. We are talking about mental health aspect of life. The availability of therapy and other, avenues of, I would say, help more than anything else. How are you doing today, Caitlin?
I'm doing well, Matt, and I'm really excited because I feel like this is an episode that we almost from the get-go we're like excited to have a conversation about, film an episode about. So I was really excited prepping about this, and was definitely a little bit of a moment of like I'm so proud of myself for coming so far. So maybe this could be something where somebody else maybe hears and is validated in that same type of thought pattern as well. So
yeah, I think that a growth mindset is the biggest thing that you have to adapt when it comes to any kind of mental health aspect, and getting help and all of those things are a growth mindset, because even deciding I need to get help is a huge step and a huge growth. And then taking that next step to get help is an even bigger step and an even bigger growth. So I think all of those things are, ultra important, if I may say so.
Absolutely.
Real quick, I just wanted to say, as we are recording this, it is drastically after Valentine's Day, but shout out to the missus, because we just got matching tattoos, and it's a funny story, and this is going to be a slightly heavy episode, and I'm going to start it off on a light note. So she sent me a text message, and I don't know if you saw the pictures, but
I did. I saw it on Instagram.
She sent me a text message, and she said, "I loge you," and I said, "You loge me," and then I just was like, I'm gonna let this go all day, and I'm just gonna keep saying it. But being the good husband that I am, I was like, let me go look this up to make sure that I'm not saying something stupid to her, or we're like being like saying a nasty word to each other and don't realize it. And what it ended up being is a private theater or box in like a movie theater or a grand theater, and it's just a private little area. And we met at a movie theater, and we were like, how fitting. And then I said, can we get that tattooed? And there might be debate on who said it first. We have to go back to the text message to see that. But either way, we just got it matching. Hers is written in my handwriting, my terrible handwriting, and mine is written in her handwriting. And I think the thing that we spent the most time on was drawing the hearts that are at the end, because it was like, is that how I draw a heart? No, maybe. I don't know. I think I have like 12 hearts written on this piece of paper right here.
That's awesome. You got some practice in.
Yeah, exactly. And we just got them the other day. We were supposed to get them around Valentine's Day, but we kept having stuff pop up, and it just didn't work out. So I'm really excited about that, because, it's those little things. I'm gonna try not to
sweet.
Like, get all sappy, but I love it. And
if you're gonna be sappy about anyone, it should be your wife, Matt. Come on.
It should. I like it. It's not our first matching tattoo either. We have other one or another one, but
that's cool.
It is. I like it. I'm excited to have it on my arm. She can see hers all the time. I can't ever see mine, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because I can't twist my arm in the way I need to do it. A mirror might help, I guess.
There you go. That's okay.
Yeah. So like I said, I just want to start this episode off on a light note, something a little bit cheery, before we jump into the therapies. That in your interview, we talked about that, and you've been really open about your journey, and you wrote a book about it. I've also been pretty open about it, but I think that this is going to show another side of both of us in terms of how we feel like the world is kind of scoped around that.
Yeah.
And I think that's that's important. And right now, people that have been through it, people that have come out the other side, talking about their experiences, I think is what's needed. And hopefully somebody takes something from this one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we can also maybe start with a disclaimer that neither of us are licensed therapists or doctors or anything like that. We have just a lot of life experience between us to give some insight about what has worked for us, not worked for us, things like that. But again, we're talking about medication, types of therapy. That is absolutely a conversation that is perhaps best between you and a mental health professional. But again, I'm an open book, so I don't give a shit, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way, and I think that is a good disclaimer. We are not experts. If you are interested in getting help, or you are seeking help, or you are currently getting help, those people are definitely your best resources. We, as Caitlin likes to say, are just some idiots with internet access and a microphone. It's the truth.
It is. That's okay, though. We got it.
Yeah. So first, let's just talk about the types of therapy. And, there's like your psychoanalysts, basic therapy that like you just go, there's that like understanding of, textbook what a therapist should or shouldn't be. Behavioral therapy, obviously, cognitive, which is, again, we're not experts, so like that's one of those ones that's like real deep dive. Humanistic therapy is one that we just I didn't know about. You also didn't know about, and you looked it up.
Yes, I googled it, and I didn't know. I'm like, humanistic therapy. I don't even have like a go-to assumption for what that type of therapy would like be. But I did look it up, and it's a humanistic therapist focuses on helping people free themselves from disabling assumptions and attitudes so that they can live fuller lives. The humanistic therapist emphasizes growth and self-actualization rather than curing diseases or alleviating disorders. So to me, again, idiot with internet access, I just told Matt too, like to me that sounds like a life coach versus any other form of therapy. That sounds to me like it's making lemonade out of lemons type of approach, not necessarily saying like, we're here to fix your major depressive disorder. Let's just maybe help with a reframe so that you can shift your mindset and view it instead of a weakness or instead of a fault in your character, that this is perhaps an opportunity for growth or an opportunity for something good to come your way. So that was humanistic therapy, and I had never even heard about that before we sat down to start filming.
Yeah, I didn't either, and I would agree. I think that's a definitely sounds like the life coachy thing, but makes it sound more in like less like somebody that has like 15 clients and more like somebody that's there for you, even though they might have 15 clients. Like it's not like just call them when you're feeling down and they're like, okay, have you put down a job application today? Have you gotten up today? Like it sounds more personal than that. And I think that for somebody that might be exactly what they need. I'm going to look into that more, because that may be something that I just need somebody that like reminds me, hey, this is what you got going on, focus on these things, reframe it, whatever, and reminds me of those, because that it sounds interesting. The next thing I wanted to talk about, because that's the basis of what therapy is. If you've found this podcast, chances are you have, like us, been down the road of, man, some shit has happened.
Mm-hmm.
But with the modern technologies and such as the interwebs and all of those mobile devices in your pockets can stretch, I think the uptick in online and like mobile resources is pretty awesome. I haven't personally used any except for one through my insurance, which was like more of a check-in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what that was called, only because it didn't have a name currently. It was like when they launched it, and it was just the resource. It wasn't like, it didn't have a true name yet. So, those kinds of things. Have you had any experience with the online or any?
Weirdly enough, I started my fun adventure in therapy back in the peak of the pandemic. So I was an employee for a major metropolitan police department, and they had a contract with a therapist's office who had several therapists on staff. And as part of their treatment plan for, in response to the pandemic, they actually called every single employee one-on-one. So I had, I've only ever had virtual therapy appointments. I've never had an in-person therapy appointment, especially because in light of the pandemic, I think that has made therapy a lot more readily available for people. But I do think that it also presents some challenges as well. So I really love remote therapy. I like that I don't really have to disrupt my daily schedule too much. On days where I'm working from home and I have an hour session, I can literally close my work laptop, open my personal laptop, and have therapy for an hour, and then again turn around and start working again. So again, the ease, and of course being a mother of two tiny humans, that definitely helps me a lot. I need a flexible schedule. So
do you think that being able to do it from home, do you think it makes you feel a slight bit more comfortable because you're in your natural environment instead of like going to this awkward office that smells kind of like a doctor's office but kind of like an old shoe at the same time? Yeah,
I think it the fact that I'm in my I call this my she cave. This is where I literally sit and have my therapy appointments. The fact that I'm in a safe place, I'm literally in my sweatpants. I know that this space to me in my home is the heart and soul of where I come to recoup and relax. I also think that it helps me too, because I've had a lot of really powerful and like emotional breakthroughs in therapy. So having to drive to and from like an hour appointment where I live versus like where probably the nicer or like the where I would probably have to go to get mental health, to get therapy, get treatment through therapy. I don't have an hour drive of me ugly crying and being occupied by my thoughts to battle with traffic on the interstate. So I think that that definitely means that it's a better fit for me than probably in-person therapy.
Yeah. I wouldn't have thought about that. The drive time. When I was going, my drive was like 5 minutes, and I mostly like walked around with the extra 10 I had because I don't like being late to anywhere. So I could see how that would be, taxing for a lot of people. And I think that, in this topic of availability of therapy and resources, that's definitely something that has to come into the equation is, the distance. That's not one that I thought of immediately, but that's definitely, the biggest part of availability, I guess, is it near you? So
yeah,
that hour drive could be rough for somebody. So
when we were talking about, or I was thinking about this part of our conversation, yes, there's in-person and there's remote sessions, but a big thing that I have had a thorn in my ass about with therapy is costs associated with it. I was very fortunate with the first therapist that I talked about with their COVID response plan. They had a contract with my employer, so all of those sessions were free, but it was like a limited amount of sessions that I could actually have. So my therapist at the time was super helpful and kind of like pushed the envelope with the amount of sessions, because they say it's like 6 sessions per issue. So luckily for me, I have lots of issues, man. But like, so that was where I started my therapy, journey. And for me, it was like finally accepting that I needed the help to go to finding a therapist that I really, really vibed with, to the fact that they were free. Now that I'm for sure like a big kid, I have the health insurance plan that my whole family's on. Every single therapy session until my deductible is hit for the year cost me $120 an hour. And like, yes, I could, there's all kinds of adult financial things that we could have a conversation about here. But I have had to have a conversation or two, especially when my second son was born, with, is this 1 hour session going to bring me $120 worth of relief and insight and clarity?
Yeah.
Or should I just go call my little sister and talk her ear off for an hour? Because that's free.
Yeah. I love it.
So I feel like, Matt, I'm kind of very fortunate that I'm even in a position where I can even entertain paying that much hourly for therapy. But I mean, I don't know what your experience has been. I know people that have wanted and have been desperate for conversation with a mental health clinician or a mental health professional, and literally have been priced out of the help. So,
yeah. I mean, my first experience with any kind of counseling or anything was I was still on my mom's insurance, and she's like medical professional, so like she had pretty decent insurance. And one of the things that they did was, similar to you, I only got 3 sessions per like issue, so it was like I went to the first one, I went to the second one, and then on the third one, she was talking to me, and she said, it sounds like you are extremely capable of working through these issues. And normally this is where I would write you, some sort of referral to, I guess, fully be a patient of hers. And she's like, but honestly, I'm going to give you these exercises to work on. And, they should help you out because you're processing what you need to process. You're doing what you need to do, and you're being aware of what you need to be aware of. And, if you want, you could set up an appointment where you come talk to me once every like 3 months, and, unless something drastic changes. And in my head, I was just like, did you just tell me like, thanks, but bye? Is that what just happened? And I was like, thank God that was free. So it's like, as soon as you said that, like, is this worth X amount of dollars, or can I go do this thing for free? That was kind of how it started. So it's like, I don't know.
How did you proceed forward when that therapist said, okay, thanks, you're good now, bye?
Honestly, I started trying to like address the issues myself, I guess. So like, I know I'm hurting. I know what the problems are. I'm trying to process whether my feelings are real or my feelings are just my mind telling me that this is a problem. I'm not equipped to, one of my favorite sayings is you can't go to the solution for the problem, or you can't go to the problem for the solution. And I know what I have going on, but I don't know if what I have going on is just a perception or is actually based in reality. So I started having to go to, essentially go into the problem for the solution. Like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Are you noticing this? If you do notice this, can you like help me like stay on the right path? Because I don't know what else to do. And then, things got worse, and then things got better, and then things got worse, and it was just a yo-yo effect, just like any kind of diet where you're trying to do it on your own, with no real guide. There's only so much you can do yourself.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Kind of thought of this question off the top of my face as I'm listening to you give your perspective about that experience. Have you had any breakthroughs in therapy that you would not have been able to get to by yourself?
Um, yeah, not. I can't. I can't specifically say yes. There's an underlying, I guess, like irrational fear-ishy thing, and like I remember sitting in a session having, music ish, white noisy beach noises and stuff playing behind me or playing in my ears while we were doing this thing. And I realized that like I can't turn off. I can't not be like hyper focused or hyper aware. And that was the first time I think I noticed that. So like if that counts, then yeah, but I don't know that it changed anything. I just am aware of it now.
Being
Okay, good. Well, then,
being self-aware is only like a third of fixing the problem. And some people arguably are not even that self-aware of their own issues. So if that's all you got out of therapy, that's still a dub, Matt. Come on.
Yeah. Well, good. I give myself a golf clap. No, and that's the thing is like, I have always been really good about, I guess, not internalizing anything. Like I asked you the other day, like, do you think because we're vocal processors, we have a different outlook on a lot of things? And even as a young age, when I didn't know something, I went and asked, I sought an answer. I was always curious and always had a thirst for the answers. And when it comes to like mental health and, that kind of, area, there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of, capability that you can go do research and find. Nothing replaces a person that is trained to do it, in my opinion. But there's still a lot of resources that cost no money that you can work on. Like one of my favorite things is finding questionnaires to fill out that don't necessarily tell you you're, type A this, or you have diagnosed this, but they at least give you a little bit of insight on, whether your feelings are normal in the terms of like, you're not the only one feeling it. And that alone is a huge jump, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten a lot of validation from my therapy sessions, especially if it's just also very nice to have a conversation with a completely unbiased third party, specifically in like familial conflict, which I've had a fair share of, without getting into too much detail. But I'll be like, hey, this is a thing that happened to me. And let me tell you, that really pissed me off. And I don't know why. And my first therapist would be like, oh, well, first of all, this person telling you that or whatever is, first of all, extremely invalidating. So can I just validate how much you are allowed to feel whatever you need to feel in whatever context and then react after? Because a lot of my early developmental teenage years were trauma informed, which
you don't say.
Get this, Matt. That does not set you up for healthy coping mechanisms. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, I would have never guessed that.
So just to have an unbiased third party kind of be able to tell them what's going on and validate whatever struggle it is when nobody else arguably can give me that like larger picture. There's just always like, years of unspoken history or additional context or, all kinds of things. So that's definitely been something that has helped me with therapy, or that therapy has helped me with. But I think the biggest breakthrough that I've ever had in therapy was figuring out that I'm not 100% who I am because of trauma. Specific example, I was talking to my current therapist about my mom, about how she had made some difficult decisions of completely cutting ties with toxic family members, moving us states and states away from family members who were not healthy or positive relationships or anything like that. And I was just talking about how much of a fierce advocate she was for her children. Earlier in that same session, we had talked about me and motherhood and all these things. And my therapist said, so basically what you're telling me is the things that you are struggling with are things that your mother also struggled with, that she was decisive. She was not worried about ruffling feathers. She was vocal, and she was going to do whatever needed to be done to keep her family happy and safe. She told me, Matt, let me tell you, she told me, so you're telling me that there's a very good likelihood that you would have ended up being the same type of mother had your mom not died. And then she looked at me and she said, you are much less broken by your trauma than I think you are. And I was like, whoa, that was definitely worth $120 that hour.
Yeah. How's that feel, like being almost like lifted off of your, off your back or something, somebody came through and slid the thing off your plate a little bit. How did that feel?
Honestly was the best moment that I've had in therapy. That's like the relief that I felt in that moment is like chasing the dragon for the first time, or trying heroin for those who are not as educated about drug culture. They say the first time that you try heroin is like the best high, and it's the high that you're always chasing. And that relief that I felt, it definitely answered a lot of questions for me, because I was grieving in that moment too. Not only did my mom die when I was 14, but also my dad had passed by then too. So it was like not only grieving that other relationship, but grieving even the possibility of getting to ask him any questions about my mom. Those were always going to be questions that went unanswered. So that's my computer. If you can hear that weird buzzing noise, sorry.
No, I'm just so enamored by like your breakthrough that like I'm hanging on to every word right now. I think that's amazing. And I think that, one of the things that makes everybody them is their ability to deal with their uniqueness in a situation. And for somebody to come along and tell you that like the thing that, you were holding on to as, probably a heavier weight than, anybody else and not your uniqueness would be able to carry. They almost absolved you of that burden. And I think that that's like huge, which again is why somebody trained to do this is definitely, worth that money when you can't afford it. And, unfortunately that is a, cost prohibited part of the availability.
Matt, I had a couple dud sessions with this therapist before we finally got there, but we did get there. And that's something that I will always be grateful to that therapist for. So.
I like it. So, kind of staying on the, train of, the breakthroughs, do you think that when you have a breakthrough like that and then you go back the next time, do you think that you're more inclined to, push that boundary, go a little bit further into the session? Or do you think that you recoil a little bit because nothing's going to make me feel as good as that one did? Or, is it something in between?
I would say in between, but I do remember walking away from my next session with that therapist being like bummed. Like, okay, well, that was not as good as my other session with her. Coming off of all my sessions, though, I take ravenous notes during my my therapy sessions. First and foremost, kind of like prepping for a podcast episode with you, Matt. Like I will go, and just because we only have an hour, I want to make sure that I'm being as economic with that time as possible. So I'll think back to the prior week of issues that I struggled with. Anyways, long story short, those notes turn into notes of my conversation with my therapist. There have been several therapy sessions where I have sprinted downstairs with my laptop just to sit down and tell my husband, listen to what we talked about. Listen to what I just learned about myself. Listen to all of this. And he's excited, but also there have been more times than not that he just sits back and he just like has this like dumb smile on his face. He's just like, and I'm like, what? He goes, why'd you have to pay $120 for that for you to find that out about yourself. Like, I've known that about you. Like, what, like the things that he said, something along the lines of like, therapy is helping you see yourself in the way that I see you. But he's also never told me that. And we just have like interesting communication about like heavier topics like that. So I still say worth the money. I don't know. I don't feel like I recoil as much, but also going into new therapy sessions, a lot of my attitude going into therapy just depends on what like my prior week or 2 weeks looked like. So it just depends on if I had a shittier week.
Yeah. I think that's really good, man. Like that's it. I know like body dysmorphia is a thing, and I don't know if there's a term for it as far as like the way that like you perceive yourself like emotionally and like mentally, but like the outward reflection of like how I see you or how, you know, somebody else sees you and perceives you, because that's like, I know for me, when I look at, you know, people around me, especially as a coach, I never told anybody to do something that I didn't think that they were capable of, or I wouldn't have put anybody in a position I didn't think that they were capable of learning, improving at, or just being able to flat out do. And they always, you know, I was so nervous. I don't know why you did that, and it's like, but you're here, aren't you? Like, you made it through that, right? Like, you learned something, you had fun, like whatever it is. And I wonder, you know, what that thing is in us that's like, I don't know. And then you find out, you know, like, man, this whole time I do not think like a potato.
You know,
I thought
that's
this whole
an interesting thought, because biologically, that kind of, you know, there's fight or flight, there's fight, flight, or freeze. And sometimes there's freeze where you're like, I don't know if this is smart. Like, I don't know if what would be an example of something that a kid would be scared of or nervous about, and then come back later and be like, look at what I did, coach.
Yeah. I think, you know, one of the things that I can say specifically is, you know, just getting into a new position, like something that you haven't done before that requires a little bit more speed than what you think you have, or a little bit more.
What sport are we talking about here?
I played roller derby.
Okay. So but do you coach roller derby?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
I coached and played.
Following. Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of times it was, you know, like I said, a little bit of speed, a little bit of position, you know, or like going out there against a specific person. And to me, it's like, I believe that, you know, you could rise to the occasion, but also I wouldn't put you in a position I didn't think you could handle. You've shown me, and I'm big on trust. I'm big on like, prove to me that this is a thing that you can do. And once you got that level of like prove or trust it, there's the rest is just like fairy dust, man. Like, now it's just nothing to do but do it. So,
yep.
You know,
absolutely.
I think that, you know, with where we're at and, you know, what we're kind of knocking at the door of now is like, you know, what people are seeking help and how to, you know, go about getting help. And, you know, I was curious as, you know, what your research or what notes you took that like you'd want to start with.
Yeah, so part of our homework for this episode was to come up with a couple like mental health facts or therapy facts that interested us. And I was super interested in looking into any information about therapy in a post-pandemic world, what that might look like or sound like. But okay, so my first fact that I found was that in 2021, around 41.7 million adults in the U.S. received treatment or counseling for their mental health within the past year. However, the way that they quantified treatment was also medication. So It's not just treatment and therapy. It's 4.17 million adults are either in therapy or on medication or both. So That was only one, that was like one of the only updated stats that I felt comfortable maybe talking about. But I feel like this has not really been a heavily researched topic. I don't know if you also felt that, kind of digging around in facts for our episode today, but that was my first one. I was kind of surprised by the 41.7 million, because some census data or some other articles about mental health research say that there's only like a less than half or a small percentage of people in the United States that actually do proactively seek therapy or counseling or treatment in the form of medication. I definitely feel like that changed after the pandemic.
Yeah, I didn't know about that stat, and I didn't research pandemic stuff specifically, but that's wild to me, and I think it's a little skewedish with like the way that they classify it. But either way, I mean, that's a lot of people, and I think that stat compared to the stat that I looked up that just made me sad, is kind of hand in hand. And why I took this episode as something that was going to be a little bit heavy, which I'm glad it hasn't been so far, but that's so many people. So it's awesome that many people are going to get help and trying to improve their situation. But it's sad that many people have to go improve their situation or seek help. And, I wonder how many of those are people that slipped through a crack somewhere, or, like yourself had been, saddled with this way of thinking, and, somebody somewhere could have done one thing like to make that situation a little bit better. And, now they're just a statistic like the rest of us. And I think that's crazy.
Yeah. So what are your facts?
So the stats that I looked up, I was most interested in, and this comes from the McClellan Hospital Research Center. They were doing in 2020 to 2021, they were doing the statistics. I assume it was probably pandemic related, but it didn't cite that specifically. But I wanted to know how many people of color, specifically Black people, were going and getting help. Ironically enough, there's an ad running on TV where there's a kid sitting at a diner table, and he's leaned back, and his friend says, "Man, you gotta quit it with that depression stuff. That's white people shit." And
are you kidding me?
Yeah, and it's like that is probably one of the more accurate things that I've seen, where it's just like that's not a like you need to like suck it up. Life ain't that bad. It's been worse. Like whatever it is. And I was like, this is kind of perfect timing for this episode. And full disclosure, I always kind of shy away from stuff like this because it just makes me sad. It just makes me makes my heart hurt, because I grew up with, the Black person ancestral trauma stuff that everybody does. And I'm trying to break some of those cycles for my kids, just simply because somebody has to, and I want to. But what the stat was that specifically Black people seek help in a rate of about 25%. And that seems like 25%, but white Americans seek help at a rate of 40%. And what skews the results in a way that makes it really sad is there's not a disproportionate need between the two. The mental health aspect and the reports of what people are dealing with, and people that were surveyed and asked, do they feel this way X number of days or X number of times, was about equal. So it wasn't just simply because of one thing or the other, or it has to be a little bit of availability, a little bit of, I can't go do that. People are going to think I'm weak. And that made me sad. And then delved me into a whole nother rabbit hole of, those kind of stats and those kind of things, and people's names that were attached to having been somebody that suffered through that without going to get help because they thought it would make them look weak.
What do you think? You kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are some reasons why you think that discrepancy exists? Granted, that TV commercial does not bode well for your answer, but please.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The good thing is that commercial was like, the rest of the commercial is supposed to be about seeking help and finding, like, every person in the ad, like, finds somebody that wants to talk to them or a friend that's actually supportive and not just, saying something stupid out the side of their face. So that it was a good commercial. It just, that part, like, resonated with me because I've heard stuff like that before. But I definitely think that it comes down to, the perception of strength. And for me, it's not about, I have to be strong because, the man's trying to keep me down, or because white society is trying to keep me down, or whatever. I just look behind me and see how many people I gotta be strong for. And I'm just one person. So everybody has that. And when the world is trying to tell you you're not enough, but everything you do is to the best of your abilities, and that it should be enough because you're not doing any less than the people around you, that's a hard life to live. That's a hard thing to cope with and to decide, okay, but now if you show any weakness, it's like, oh, well, see, he's got a problem because he's got a bad attitude. So you can't have that bad attitude. You got to suck that up. And then it's like, oh, well, he's moody because he's the angry black guy. Like, you got to suck that up because you can't do it. And I think all of those things are a problem. But then you also have a whole, culture of black women who are, idolized for their figure or their hair or, something, and are almost taught that they aren't anything more than that, and that they're always going to be baby mamas or something else. And, they're trying to fight out of that stigma. They're trying to do something, but being told that they can't. And, now you have the fact that they are a woman trying to be this thing. And, like, how do you square with that part? And so there's just so many levels of it, I think.
We went there. We got there. Don't worry. This episode did get to a heavy spot. Okay, well, let me do a quick plug for a resource for white people like me who do not understand the types of cultural differences that you are talking about. Because believe it or not, whether you want to because period, point blank, hard stop, those cultural differences are there. And the whole time you're giving your answer, I'm sitting there like nodding, like listening, absolutely not understanding. But to me, you're telling me it almost sounds like the pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing, which it's 2023. If we need to have a detailed conversation to invalidate that complete lie and fallacy, like, let's do it. We'll have an entire fucking episode about it if needed. However, when I was in graduate school, I had a teacher who I absolutely did not like. But she had me read a book that I will always be eternally grateful for her for making us read. It's called Code of the Streets. It's by an investigative journalist. I think his last name's Anderson. But he essentially went into inner cities and wrote all about the social contract that a corn-fed white bitch like me would not fucking understand otherwise. Talks about some of those cultural differences, talks about black men, black women, what their social capital is. And that educated me a lot. And it is written from the perspective of a black man. So those are really heavy fucking topics. And I'm really proud of you for talking about that, Matt. And that definitely is a conversation that I just need to sit back and shut up about. You are incredible for recording yourself and putting yourself out there on the internet for such a sensitive topic specific to gender and race. And you're talking about breaking generational cycles of trauma. Someday your kids are going to look back to this episode and be like, yeah, my dad fucking rocks. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I will throw a caveat in there because, like I said, it makes me sad, but I wanted to include this note specifically because somebody that was a person that I would believe most of America looks up to, no matter where you come from, what you did. Martin Luther King Jr. is actually one of those people that suffered in silence because he didn't want to be perceived as weak in, what he was doing. And if, somebody like that was still concerned about being perceived as weak, even though everything he was doing was the opposite, it just shows how damaging, mental health can be. Because at one point in time, you have an entire race of people rallying behind you, and they would hang on every word you say, but you were still worried about being weak. That shows that even the greatest among us can, falter and feel, trapped inside our own heads. So if you're, just a normal person going to work, trying to get through your day, if you're suffering it, there's help to be found, but also realize that everybody can suffer. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not, something that you have to be ashamed of or, concerned that somebody's going to see you as weak, because everybody's got it. Everybody's doing it. So
that was a really damn good point, Matt. And now I'm going to be resonating and stewing in that. I can already tell for the rest of the evening. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that to all of our attention. But I'm definitely going to stew on that.
Yeah. Like I said, it took me into a completely different, avenue. And like I said, I was concerned more with that side of it than anything else, because the availability of therapy also, doesn't cross that line as much for people of color. And that was kind of what I found out in this, in this research. And that sucked.
I want to educate myself more about that.
Okay.
But yeah, so speaking of education, I told you that I had some data points that I wanted to make. I would argue that any data or stats that we have about therapy in the United States is limited at best.
Yes.
First and foremost, a lot of issues with, or a lot of information about therapy and treatment, they're all HIPAA protected. So that kind of blocks the availability of some of that information. There's only so much of it that can actually be released in the first place. So a lot of the studies that I read were just polls. One poll was given out to 2,000 people or 2,000 adults in the United States. And somehow they drew the conclusion that, only 25% of people in the United States had never actually thought about going to therapy or actively sought out treatment. I'm 25% of those 2,000 people that you asked, but no, that's a garbage sample size when you're drawing concrete conclusions about a whole country. But again, we've touched on it. Research about this topic is awful, because I still argue that there is this huge stigma behind it. There are still career fields that are actively telling people, maybe not actively telling, but where those conversations are completely thrown under the rug, disregarded, or anything like that. Specifically, law enforcement at the local, state, federal level. I believe that yes, there's a lot more conversation depending on what department that you're at. There are 100% departments still in our country that do not even open up about about the topic or offer resources to patrol officers or to anybody. When we know for a fact in law enforcement there's a higher rates of divorce, suicide, and alcoholism. Period. Hard stop.
Yeah. That's a big push for our, the war fighters now.
Yes,
and,
military was my next one.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. That kind of rolls into my "that's what she said" for this week. But I will totally follow your lead about where you want to take the conversation next.
There's one more stat that I wanted to share, and it's on the same topic. It's just, one of the things that I didn't know, like I said, ancestral trauma. One of the things that I didn't know when I thought about it, after reading this, I was like, damn, that makes sense. The most common trace back to the ancestral trauma for, any Black person, as far as, mental health concerns, goes back to slavery. And I know everybody's always like, oh, of course it's slavery. It did happen. It was a thing. But the reason why is because Black people were considered to not be sophisticated enough to even have the developmental process to be depressed or anxious or have mental, health concerns when they started documenting it, because why would they? And that's a problem. So because of that, like you said, the studies are polls. So when they polled, I couldn't find the number, but when they polled African American youth, they realized that more African American youth are at the risk of developing PTSD at nearly 65% compared to all other races.
Jesus.
And that is a 30% of their peers. Like that's wild. And that's not just specifically because of trauma. That's just because of the situations that they are growing up in. So that one, like, that is where I had to stop doing research, because that just made me really sad. And I was like, wow,
that's
I don't
heavy
know.
shit, Matt. And yes, I think that's a nationwide problem specific to youth. I don't understand it. I don't know what the solution is, but please know that I am in a field where I am bashing my head and not shutting up about it until somebody hears me. Whether I have to go to fucking, I've even told, I had a conversation with the assistant director of the 3-letter agency that I'm a federal contractor for right now. I go, what do I have to do to discuss juveniles murdering each other over Instagram beef? Like, do you want me to buy a nice suit and go to fucking DC and testify to Congress about what's going on in East St. Louis right now? Because I will.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We got there. We got to the heavy part. Shit, Matt.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. And again, as far as availability of, the mental health aspect of the world, like I said, there's tons of resources that are online now, and I didn't know this until the other day as well. But for him and for her, like the wellness company, I guess is what it is. I didn't know they were offering like counseling, and that's pretty interesting. I haven't been able to find rates. It seems like it's kind of behind like the fill out this application wall, and then they'll give you rates, because I couldn't figure it out. But I haven't used BetterHelp personally, but I've heard some good things from people that like BetterHelp has been a good resource. But a lot of the like income based counselors, I will give you the warning of they are counselors that are more of a broad stroke approach because they're not specialists.
Mhm.
So if you're going to them for help, go with the lens that they are not a specialist. They can only do so much. Give them a break, and hopefully that'll help you go into the situation a little bit better if that's the avenue that you have to go to, because therapy is available. You just have to figure it out. And if you are having trouble, you can't do it, you can't find it, reach out to one of us. I don't care. DMs are always open. We will help you.
Literally.
I want you to be here. I want you to see your kids grow up. I want you to see your puppy run down the street. I want to see you drive that car that you didn't think that you would ever be able to drive. I want to see you grow up and graduate high school. Whatever it is, I want you here. So
Ditto. I've said multiple times on my Instagram, because I am a member of the Dead Parents Club ×2, and I have been a lifetime member. I'm a lifetime member as of 2008. So I've said multiple times on my Instagram, and I'll say it here now too, my DMs are always open, always. And I make it a priority to be a resource to other people. And I know that Matt has the same attitude too, because there are
yes.
Times in my life where I wish I had a random stranger to just shoot the shit with on Instagram and maybe get their perspective about a struggle. But yeah, please reach out.
Yes, please do. All right, so we're going to wrap up that part of this and move on to my new favorite segment. That's what she said.
Yes. And again, thank you, Matt, for letting me end out the episodes with That's What She Said, where Matt just lets me talk about whatever the shit I want, and everybody just has to listen to it. But no, that's fine. I wanted to...
entertaining.
Oh, yes, it is entertaining. Hold on. But I wanted to stick to the theme of our therapy and mental health related topic. And I wanted to talk about how I had to work so fucking hard to deprogram from this notion that getting help and asking for help or getting therapy or seeking treatment through medication is a weakness. A little bit about me, and I think we've talked about it maybe. I don't know if we've talked about the specific aspect of it, but my mom died in 2008 from a crash involving a semi. And my sister and I, who were 12 and 14, followed my dad's lead. And I vividly remember very recently after the crash happening, my dad just sat back and said, we don't need to go to counseling or therapy. I don't need to pay somebody to tell me that I'm sad. I know that I'm sad. I don't need to pay anybody. And that kind of informed all of my my perspective about medication or therapy or anything like that moving forward from that point forward. Which I said, yeah, this has been a really traumatic event for me, but like if my dad just went through the same trauma and he's okay, like then who am I to say that I need help? Like, I was following his lead. Bullshit. I have now completely and proudly and loudly flipped my perspective to where I say that getting help, going forth and conquering and trying to deal with your own shit to do what's best for you and your loved ones and those that depend on you is the single greatest thing that you will ever do out of love for every single person that depends on you. And it is the greatest declaration of love. Shouldering your shit and holding it and just deciding to just be okay in your misery is the weak way out. It's the comfortable way out because, yeah, you're miserable. Yeah, maybe you're making other people around you miserable, or you could be living a happier, more full life. Straight up, the hard thing to do is admit that you need the help, and not only admit it, but go forth and try to deal with your shit. That's what strong people do. And if you feel like you have done what's called like therapist hopping, or like trying to figure out what works, and you're still not finding the pieces of your puzzle that mesh well together to you. My sister-in-law told me a couple years ago something that was really insightful. While I was starting my adventure in therapy, and she was a little bit further into it than I was, she said, do not be discouraged if you have to try a therapist or two before you find one that you mesh with that will actually help you the way that you need to be helped, and not the way that, it's kind of like dating a little bit, if you're going to let that person into your heart and your mind at really intimate levels, of course you are not going to be comfortable doing that with everybody. So it doesn't matter how many therapists it takes. What matters is that you are resilient enough to keep looking for the next one if you find one that you do not mesh well with, or you do not feel comfortable opening up to, or whatever the reason is, or because they're too fucking expensive, because that's a whole other thing that we've kind of touched on already in this episode. However, what matters is that you are doing the hard thing of dealing with your shit instead of many generations of people ahead of us who decided to just live in their misery their entire lives. Speaking from experience, I have people like that in my family that have just lived out their entire life sad and mad and angry because they just buried all their shit. And I know I am living a much happier and more fulfilling life than I thought was possible when I was 14, in the throes of my, trauma related to my mom dying. So, also medication fucking works, and it saved my life. So, I think that people who are judgmental are ill-informed, perhaps uneducated, or have just not found something that works for them. Because I'll tell you straight up, Lexapro, even first thing in my acknowledgments page on my book is, I don't know if the person who invented Lexapro will ever read this book, but if you do someday, I'd love to buy you beer, because that person, whoever it was, saved my life. Period. So that's what she said.
I love it. I read your book. So when you were, saying, your dad's reaction to therapy and not needing to pay somebody to tell him, when I read it in the exact voice that you just delivered that same. So I love it. It was destined to be. I'm so glad that like we had. He
didn't sound like that in fucking all, but my impression of him does not ever.
But that's the point. Is that's how I read it, because I read it in your voice and how you would say it. So, and mind you, we had only talked like
that's
once
okay,
at that point.
Yeah,
so
I love it.
Another thing that you said, and this is something that I've been harping on Courtney about, and anybody else that is struggling with any kind of like getting past the hump to go get help, or getting past the hump because they won't get out of their own way. You have to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And if you're not willing to do that, then you will never move that bar. If you're going to stay comfortable, then you're not fixing the issue. Every time you push up against it and it starts to feel like a little abrasive or a little stingy or a little hurty, you recoil back to comfortable, and you got to get uncomfortable. I'm not saying that you got to jump in fast. Something that I heard the other day that I would have never thought is, if you're in a rush to do something, that means you're afraid of it and you're trying to just get it over with. So it doesn't have to be a fast process. It just has to be a process. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I know that you also said you have grief specific stuff, and if you want, you can send me the ats on Instagram, and when this episode drops, we can drop them. I wanted to give a shout out to the Holistic Psychologist on Instagram. Even if you don't know much about your specific mental health, if you read those slides and you're like, damn, that one's me. And you slide and you're like, damn, that one's me. And you slide and you're like, damn, that one's me. And you slide and you're like, oh, that one's not me. And then you slide. So like, similar to a horoscope, yeah, you might be able to find something that relates to you inside of everything. But with a lot of their slides, I think that as long as you ask yourself that question, you're doing a little bit of the work every time. Following resources like that on social media instead of something that just makes you sad or hate yourself is way better use of your time, in my opinion. Or, you know, the resources that Caitlin has talked about, where it's, you know, grief specific stuff, because it's a community of people that are trying to support. And one of the things that always blows my mind is how many like famous people names pop up in the people that have liked the post, because it's like, oh damn, like I wouldn't have expected you to follow this page because it doesn't seem like something that like you would have followed. And then you're like, damn, you're a real person maybe, and you got feelings too.
Yeah. Huh. I think that's kind of an advantage of being part of the Dead Parents Club. So Young in Life is, everybody's parents die eventually. So if you're not there yet, buckle up. We're ending this episode on a light note, Matt.
Yeah. No, so it is.
Which, can I just say real quick too, if I had any piece of advice for Courtney or for anybody that just whatever Matt just said about the things getting icky and then you just walking or like hiding away from them, if that resonated with you, the short moments of pain and uncomfortability that it takes to lead to that breakthrough, which completely alters your perspective about something that you're switching with. Those short moments leading up to that breakthrough is nothing compared to the next part of your life that starts after that, where you no longer have to live with that, whatever it was, burdening you as much as it was. So, Courtney.
Boom. Sound clip for social media right there. Love it. Yeah, I love it. And I love that we had this conversation. And just like always, it's, you know, for two strangers who met on the internet, I think that, you know, this is better than what Craigslist usually produces, I would imagine. So I thank you for being here. I thank you for having this conversation. And, you know, like we keep saying, our DMs are open. And on a topic as heavy as this, like, absolutely reach out if you feel like reaching out. For one, I love giving advice. I love helping people. I love being, like I tell people all the time, if you just need my DMs to be a black hole where you just send stuff and just to get it off your chest, send it. And I will just be like, yep. And you will never see the little like red button if that's what you, or like that I saw it if that's what you want, just because I just need you to know that I'm here to support you no matter what. So everybody, all year, everyone,
reach it, Matt.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Make sure that you're subscribed, following, whatever the feature is on whatever platform you're listening to. Make sure you're reviewing. If you want to hear somebody on here, if you want to hear something on here, drop us a line. Let us know. That's kind of what this is for, is, you know, as much as I love talking to you, Caitlin, hopefully people are listening.
People probably get annoyed with me too. That's okay. Switch.
Oh, never. No, never.
Thanks again for having me, Matt. And thank you for opening up and giving us a perspective that I don't feel like enough people are educated about. So,
yeah, absolutely. The bell is about to ring. If you want to drop us a voice message or simply ask a question, you can do that by clicking the link in the show notes below. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. It helps more people find us. Theme music by Kinsey. More music available on Spotify. Remember, every day is a class. Go learn something.